Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to the Hustle Nation podcast. This is episode number 5. Up until now, we've been talking about what hustle means. And here at the Hustle Nation podcast, the word hustle is an acronym for something much greater. In the first few episodes, we've talked about the H, the U, the S, the T, and today we'll talk about the L, which is learning. So for those of you that are kind of new to the podcast or maybe just joining us for the first time, Dustin is going to break down what that means, and we're going to talk extensively about learning today.
Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, really the core of this, right, is hustle means similar things to each other, but it doesn't mean the same thing to us all. And so the idea is, as if we define hustle as leaders, not only can it be more of a North Star for us to follow and to learn from and to improve, but also for those around us, right? If we really want to have hustle spread in our organizations, we got to define what those behaviors are. And so, hustle is an acronym. So H stands for hard work. This is really about, nothing good ever happened without you got to put the time in. You got to be cranking while you're doing it, right? And also be focusing and prioritizing the things that really matter. Follow that with the U, which is unrelenting. This is about, commitment, persistence, never giving up, right? Fighting through those things. And then building upon that is where we start to get to the S, which is, smarter, not just harder, right? Which this is almost starts to become the cheat codes of hustle, where we're working smarter to be more efficient, not just to, go sit on a beach somewhere, but to actually create that bandwidth and capacity so we can double down and even achieve our goals that much faster. Then moving on to the T, this is all about taking chances, right? So, this is about, not being afraid about failure. This is about getting outside those comfort zones, because ultimately that's really where we can grow, and taking those chances to fail, learn from them, move forward, get outside your comfort zone, do it all over again. So now moving to the L, which is really about, learning from others, because it's such an easy way for us to continue to get better as an individual and as a team, is the value of collaboration, the value of learning from each other. And especially in today's world, where it is easier than it's ever been to find people that are aspirational, that are better than you at something, to find those people to learn from, so that you can continue to hustle and continue to get faster and faster and closer to hitting your goals.
Well said. I think that's phenomenal. Learning to me is so key. I've had the chance to coach many youth sports teams and organizations, and I've always said that those who teach or those who coach must never cease to learn. Whether you're coaching, like I was, U8 soccer for a bunch of first and second graders, or you're coaching a championship level high school, college football team, it's so important to always be learning, because while, yes, many of these are copycat leagues that we live in, ultimately there's new techniques that come around all the time. There's new plays. There's new ways of going about things. There's new ways of coaching and training your people. And I just think that is so key. But I also go back to this is, so often at night I'm on my computer, I'm on my phone, and a lot of people look at that as work. I really don't, because I'm not always working, but a lot of times I'm learning. But my brain doesn't know that that's what I'm doing. I'm just curious. I'm exploring. I'm reading articles about the stock market, about crypto, about NFTs. I'm very hungry to learn and to know. And when people bring that up in conversation, which happens a lot, right? Even politics, I want to be able to have intelligent conversations, specifically in the workplace. So if that's a trending topic about a new social media platform or something big that's happening in my industry, I want to be able to have an intelligent conversation. And if something is supposed to be really big that I should be investing in, like, these NFTs people are talking about, I want to be learning, and I want to be learning from other people. So I've really made it a point in recent years to consume a lot of podcasts. I, for one, prefer listening over reading when I have the chance. But I think, however it is that you prefer to consume, finding a way that you can learn and absorb, it's going to make you a better person to be able to have those intelligent conversations. And sometimes it makes you thirsty for more. That's just from my personal experience.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things relative to learning from others, kind of one of the first tenets to me that I always look at is really look at your network. And this isn't just about network for the sake of network and expanding your network. Certainly, if you have a more expanded network, you have more diverse thought, you have more diverse opinions, right? And those are all great ways for you to learn and to kind of expand your view. But to me, one of the simplest things was actually one of the things that got me so excited about Hustle Nation is, there's that age old saying, show me your friends and I'll show you your future, right? Which is really this premise of, in many ways, you become who you're surrounded by. We know this as parents, right? So if all of a sudden our kids, frankly, are hanging around with the wrong crowd, that concerns us, right? Because they're more likely to assimilate to that crowd. Well, the same is true for success. And when I think of, how do you learn the best from others, one of the things I'm constantly challenging myself to do is, how do I surround myself with more people that are even more aspirational for me, right? Because they're going to naturally get me outside of my comfort zone, because I'm going to talk about things, I'm going to experience things, I'm going to hear things that they're going to talk about, get excited about, their views of the world or views of what's going on is going to challenge me to just think differently. So, to me, when we think about yes, lifetime learning is a key thing, but how do we actually do it, right? What are some simple ways we can do it? I challenge, when you talk about like the podcasts, or listen to, audiobooks and things like that. I do a lot of the same. One of the things that I think is really interesting is there is like 90% of the world that would never consider reaching out to the creator of that podcast or the writer of that book. When you talk to the most successful people in the world, they all do that. They all do that. They reach out to, look, you're this podcast and you're this thought leader, and I want to learn from you. I don't want to just listen to your podcast. I want to listen to your podcast, and I want to talk to you. I want to meet with you. I want to learn from you more directly. Because if you're sharing this good stuff publicly, what can I learn from you on a more one-on-one setting? Sort the same with books. And to me, that was a light bulb moment to me. I probably started doing that maybe like 10 years ago. And I'll never forget, it was actually one of my mentors that I had learned from. And he actually had, we were talking basically about a book that was unique to our industry. And he just reached out to the guy. Like, you did what? He's like, well, yeah, I mean, his contact information is right there. Why wouldn't I reach out to him? And I flew him out here, and we met for the afternoon, and we talked and we learned and all that sort of stuff. And to me, that was mind blowing to me, because prior to that, it was, well, if you wrote a book, or you were on a big influencer on YouTube, it was almost like you were untouchable. You're impossible to capture. But then all of a sudden, you realize, no, that the most successful people, that's what they're doing. They're trying to actually not just connect with them; they're trying to bring them into their network.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I have a friend who's a marketer and a bit of a public speaker, motivational speaker, we'll say, and he has a slogan that's kind of a catchphrase for his business, and he says, "Change your circle, change your life." And I mean, I've heard things like this for a long time, but I truly believe it, because there are a lot of people who are aspiring to be wealthy or successful or be a leader or be higher up in their company, and you have to do that. But the excuse that we hear so often is, well, like, I don't have a circle. I don't know anybody like that. So how do I do it? Right. And I think you go back to some of the things you and I both said, which is, yeah, you can learn from people via podcasts and ebooks and audiobooks, et cetera, et cetera. But we have this wonderful tool called LinkedIn that so many of us know about. You can literally follow many millions of different people who are successful at different levels. And it's interesting. I posted a video earlier this year on LinkedIn about how to generate more LinkedIn connections. I just feel like there's so many people who do it in a spammy way. And someone got tagged on a post I'd never heard of. So I clicked on his profile, and he's a very successful founder, startup guy, exited a company for a lot of money, and he reached out and wanted to connect with me. And granted, this does not happen all the time, right? That's the first time that happened. And I don't expect it to happen to most people, but he thought I was a thought leader. He thought that I had something maybe that was knowledgeable to share with him. And yeah, you're right. Those are the types of things that happen. And it does take some luck, but it does also take what we talked about in the last episode, which is stepping outside your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to send someone a message on LinkedIn or name another platform and say, hey, I love what you're doing. And again, there's no agenda there, but I'd love to connect again down the road, or say thank you for the content. I also think that we talk about networking a lot, which again, you have to step outside your comfort zone for most people, because I would imagine that, like myself, when I had to do it in my earlier career, I didn't really want to go talk about myself and say, hey, I'm Chris, this is what I do. But ultimately, that's how you get to meet new people, and sometimes people that may be a couple steps ahead of you. And sometimes changing your circle can take years, slowly and progressively, to kind of work your way to where you want to get. But again, like anything, it's a process or a recipe, and it takes time, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, no one can ever take your network away from you. And so when you think of it that way, right, it is one of the few things, people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's that same concept. And so what are you doing to constantly expand that network? And it's not just a quantity thing, to your point of LinkedIn, right? There's kind of a strategy on LinkedIn that was what they call the Lions, the LinkedIn Open Network, right? And the idea was just, let's just try to amass as many LinkedIn connections as we can, not necessarily building real relationships, but just get that number up. And I understand why it was done. I understand there was a strategy behind it at that time. But to me, your network is more than just, hey, I know somebody's email or how to get a hold of them, right? Than my LinkedIn network, right? It's about, at least you're starting to build that relationship, right? Because then they are in your network and you can expand from that. So to me, Keith Ferrazzi wrote a book, if you've ever read it, called Never Eat Alone. And it's a fantastic book if you ever get a chance to read it. The concept is basically his focus was just, how do I build the best network in the shortest period of time to basically achieve his goals? And so he was going to basically rely on just building a network to achieve his goals. And so his mindset was just all day, every day, he was just reaching out to higher and higher and higher level people to meet, to have lunch with, to meet with. And all of a sudden he found himself in a very short period of time, getting integrated with some of the most influential people in the world, in Silicon Valley and the like, just because he was so focused on building his network and how he was able to grow and learn and expand. It's a simple concept, but it is one, like a lot of things, you got to be intentional about it. If you're just hoping your network's going to grow just by sitting around and hoping for it, it's not going to happen, right? But if you're a little more intentional about it, it's amazing on how fast it can change it and how much you can learn from doing it.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way street, though, because you can't expect people to come to you. However, yes, you should be reaching out to people, but I think you can be reactive, or proactive, I should say, rather than reactive, in you can go out and you can produce content. You can talk about how you're trying to do X. Maybe it's grow your network. And by doing so, you'll have the same effect, is that people will want to connect with you all of a sudden. And I think that takes longer, but you have to be proactive about both and know that it takes time, to your point. And so that, to me, there's so many different elements in network and networking that people can do to get there. But we have a couple other go ahead.
Yeah, it builds momentum, right? And once you start expanding that network, to your point, things just happen. It starts to create that momentum, and the second piece here, learning beyond your network, really is, do you have a coach? Do you have a mentor? And a lot of those can come from those efforts, right? A lot of times you may know, hey, this is the coach I want, or this is the mentor I want, but that might change. And frankly, it probably should. As you go through your career and you change and you adapt, who those people are might change. And when we think of like coaches and mentors, a lot of times people, it's amazing to me, they don't think about the impact that can have. I mean, the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, the Tiger Woods, right? Like the most elite athletes in the world in history of time all had not just, hey, a basketball coach, but they had trainers, they had mentors, they had people coaching them and pushing them, right? And through all different times of their life. Why did they do that? If you were a paid, not even just the head coach of the team, right? But if you were the trainer and the coach of some of those athletes, that was a really great, lucrative job to have, right? Because these athletes realized, I'm willing to pay a lot of money for you to get me better at my craft. And it's
Absolutely
interesting, a lot of times when we think of business and life, people don't think about it that same way. They're like, well, they're looking elsewhere for it, right? They're thinking, well, I need to get this from my company or something like that. And certainly there's some of that, but the most successful people, that's not their regulator. They're looking for, like, I'll use mentors as an example. A great mentor for me is a guy named Scott Addis. So he ran a very successful insurance agency in Pennsylvania. Just a phenomenal guy. And this is actually a great story about a network. So this started, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years ago. And he was really changing our industry for the better in a lot of different ways. And so he was, published, and he was in every news, every magazine article in the industry and things like that. And I remember talking to people in our industry for years about him, and everyone's like, "Yeah, did you read this article?" They're always trying to like learn what he was doing through reading these articles. And I just reached out to him and said, "Hey, can we talk?" Well, then as it turns out, he had like this small group of people that he was kind of coaching and mentoring and things like that. So, he had an event in Philly that I went to and started to learn from him and build a relationship. I ended up doing that. I did that same workshop like 7 times with him. And it was really just because that gave me 2 days to just build a relationship with him, pick his brain, right? It wasn't even about, I'd already been to the workshop, so to speak. It was more about all the things I was learning in the off sessions, because while everyone else was still absorbing that material, I was saying, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to learn from one of the best. And to this day, he's one of my significant mentors, and I've quite a few of them. But had I not taken a chance, right, had I not been focused on expanding kind of my purview, and then just finding a way for him to build a relationship with him where I wanted to create value for him too. So over the years we partnered on a lot of different things, because I'm in many ways very indebted to him for all the things he's taught me and coached me along the years, that I want to I'm looking for ways to give back to him as well.
Is it fair to say he's as much a friend as a mentor at this point?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I
think that's interesting.
Yeah, I would have said initially it was, I just want to learn from this guy, right? And then you build a real relationship, right? You start to understand his family, and understand he understands mine, right? And so all of a sudden you look 10, 12, 13 years later, and it's like, oh, this is a real relationship. But so that there's some mentorships there, but then the other part is kind of the difference to me between a mentor and a coach. A mentor is more of that aspirational person that probably isn't, you're probably not actually paying them necessarily to
Right.
do something with you or anything, versus a coach is somebody that I'm actually writing a check, and there's that different level to me, because a mentor, you can learn from it, you're like a sponge, but a coach can call out your BS, right? You're
True.
writing that check because they're going to be the one that says, what the hell are you thinking? You are so off base, right? Versus, it depends on your mentor in a lot of cases, but a mentor may not want to do that, right? They might want to.
We need to hear that sometimes.
But yes, a coach, they're the ones to say, you are way off base. I need to push you. You need to think differently. You need, and to me, I've had the great fortune of having both a lot of coaches and mentors, over the years, and I would never go without them. I mean, to this day, I still have a coach who was an executive at a multi-billion-dollar company, and to this day, whether it be him coaching me, I have a few other mentors that I lean on extensively, and then my network. I'm constantly looking for ways to expand that network, to learn from people that are doing things that I just never experienced before.
Yeah, key there is you have no agenda other than you want to learn, and I think that's key. You talked about briefly events like conferences and such. We've all been to them, some more than others. I'm sure you've been to your fair share. I look back at a lot of those. To me, I don't always take that much from the conference, but what I take the most from are the people that I get to interact with. And I think that goes back to taking advantage of your time or those opportunities where you can seek out other people who are hustling and are successful, and you build relationships. And even if that person doesn't know that they're technically your mentor, we have plenty of people in our life, your life, my life, whoever, that we call. We talk shop, we talk business, and you can learn things just from having a friendship, a conversation like that. And I think that people often forget that thing. And it is so key and so important. And we're not talking about life coaches. We're talking about actual mentors, actual business coaches. I do think that's key. Some people need that. I think especially when, if you ever watch Shark Tank or The Profit with Marcus Lemonis, the people who are kind of really in some trouble need someone who can hold them accountable to get them back to where they need to be. And that's so important. So we talked about network, we talked about coaches and mentors, which is number 2. Number 3 is be curious, which everybody should be curious. Always be curious. And I go back to that first example I gave in the beginning of this episode, which was things that interest you. Now, I gave the examples of NFTs and stock markets and things like that. It could be anything. Those are related to business, and those conversations are going to start to creep in more and more and more. So whether that be something else for you, for me, I'm always trying to step outside my comfort zone and learn about and absorb things, so that I always say this, the reason why is because I want to be able to have intelligent conversations. Or in the case of NFTs, I want to be able to invest, and I want to be able to take advantage of that opportunity before it's overvalued, right? What does being curious mean to you?
So it's interesting because to me, curious is that thirst, right? It's that every single day you talked about earlier in the episode about you don't view it as work when you're, maybe on your phone or your computer late at night, just soaking up information, right? And I think there's plenty of people that they do that almost like a zombie, right? They just your Facebook, and you're scrolling, right? There's a difference between just kind of scrolling mindlessly and not really engaging versus truly being curious, right? It's that kind of lifetime learner mentality. If you've ever seen Ted Lasso, there's an episode that just always, it wasn't necessarily the starting point of this, but now since talking about this so much with Hustle, it really resonated with me. Where basically Ted Lasso is being challenged essentially for a dart game. And there's basically this bombastic ex-owner of the club that is basically judging him and thinking that he doesn't know what the heck he's doing. And so kind of is playing darts against him, and to the point where, Ted Lasso has to get, I think, like 2 triple 20s and a bullseye in order to beat him. And then otherwise the game's over. And he goes into this thing about, this Walt Whitman quote that he saw, which is, be curious, not judgmental. And the idea being is that all these people that were, ragging on him all of his life have always kind of underestimated what he could do, because, he's what I realized is none of them were curious. None of them, and they were just judgmental because they thought they knew it all. They weren't a lifetime learner. They weren't, looking at it because ultimately, if he was calling the other guy out, he said, look, if you were curious, you might ask a question, like, do you play darts, Ted? And he would have said, yeah, whatever it was, I think every Saturday and Sunday or something like that. And, from, age 11 to age 15 with his dad at the local pub or whatever. And, the idea there being is if you're constantly curious, right, you have that mentality of, I don't know it all. That doesn't mean you can't have an ego. That doesn't mean you can't, be confident of the things that you do know. But, those that have that kind of that insatiable need to just continue to learn, to be curious, even about things that, I think you kind of referenced it with your network. You may not even have an exact end goal. You're talking about like crypto and NFTs and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I did the same thing. I remember, this was, I guess, 18 months ago. I was in Arizona and I was at a bar, and where do you learn the most insightful things in my mind? You talk to the bartender, right? I mean, I learn more from certain bartenders than I do anything, because they talk to so many interesting people. And we got into like a 45-minute conversation around crypto and his view of it and my view of it. And but it would have been really easy if I wasn't curious. We would have never got into that conversation, right? I would have just been like, oh, whatever. You just like crypto. It's not my thing. Let's just kind of move on. So, I think to me, having those three things, expanding that network, having coaches, having mentors, but then having that kind of insatiable curiosity that can constantly drive you forward makes all the difference in the world.
I kind of think this portion, the be curious portion, is a bit of a byproduct of everything else we've gone through thus far. The unrelenting, the smarter, not just harder, the take chances, the learning. I think that if you've come this far, you'll be hungry and you'll want to learn. And going back to a comment you made just a moment ago, which was a lifelong learner, you should tell yourself to be a lifelong learner. And for a lot of reasons, as I said before, the intelligent conversations, the fact that learning makes you better. You expand your horizons, right? Whether it be learning a new language, learning a new skill. I, for the first time this year, started coaching soccer for my daughters because I wanted to be around. I wanted to be in there. They wanted me there for these next few years until they get to be a teenager. And so I really played very little soccer growing up. I don't even know all the rules. So I had to step outside my comfort zone. But naturally, I was very curious because I wanted to learn. I want to be able to do that. And I want to be able to talk about it and really enjoy more, as I will enjoy it if I understand the rules of the game. And so I'm giving a life example, but the same is true in business. Again, whether that's learning a new language, a new software, you should be curious, but I think you've come so far now in this podcast and hopefully in your hustle mindset that you will be curious. And when you are curious, and this is alluding to the next episode, you're going to have a smile on your face because there's going to be this sense of enjoyment, this sense of accomplishment. And I won't give any sneak peeks, but I feel like that is the ultimate kumbaya. You really feel like you're trending in the right direction, and you're really enjoying the journey, right?
100% agree.
Dustin, we talked a lot about learning. We could probably continue this conversation for another hour. Any final thoughts on this subject?
I think to me, when it comes down to learning, that last thing we talked about, really the be curious, it fuels so many of the other things. And so if you remain curious, you remain hungry for that knowledge, you're going to get it through people. You're going to get it through the wealth of resources that we have in today's world. But to really challenge yourself to, am I being curious? Am I expanding my view big enough and large enough and wide enough to where I am really challenging my learning?
Yeah. A key there is challenge. I think challenging yourself to learn, challenge yourself to read a new book, but just challenge yourself to something and be curious, be genuinely curious to learn that new thing. And I think you'll see yourself inching your way down the path you want to be. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. We hope that you like, comment, share, certainly reach out to us if you're interested, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.